So welcome again to the CVCF panel, The Future of Tech Startups in the Greater Bay Area, powered by the Asia Technology Entrepreneurship Conference, or ATEC for short. My name is Voon Lee. I'm the managing partner of Falcon Partners, a PE VC firm here in Hong Kong, and I'm a co-founder and steering committee member of ATEC itself. ATEC is the largest university alumni-led technology conference and startup competition in Asia. ATEC was founded by the Hong Kong and South China alums of Harvard, Columbia, MIT, and Stanford. And our events are designed to foster active engagements of our alumni as either founders, mentors, or investors with the growing startup ecosystem in Asia. So we actually held ATEC 2021 a few weeks ago here in Cyberport itself, and included our annual startup competition, which saw over 100 initial startup entrants compete for the title of ATEC Startup of the Year, as well as over Hong Kong $200,000 in prize money. And this panel is in fact composed of the winners of that event. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers today, who you'll see are indeed well-placed to provide observations and perhaps insight into what the future of technology startup and entrepreneurship will look like in the Greater Bay Area here in China. So we have on my right, Dr. Erica Bowles, Chief Scientific Officer of Lifespans, and the actual ATEC Startup Competition Grand Prize winner. So a big hand for Lifespans. Lifespans itself is making technologies that make bone fracture repair safer for elderly patients. Then we have Alvin Kwok, who is co-founder of One Degree, which is the ATEC Startup Competition first runner-up. And One Degree itself is building the operating system of the insurance industry. Finally, we have Crystal Pang, co-founder, CEO of Pickup, which is the ATEC Startup Competition second runner-up, which is a tech platform to help e-commerce deliver with flexibility and transparency. And finally, furthest to the right, on my right, we have Chibo Tang, managing partner of Gobi Partners, the manager of the Alibaba Hong Kong Entrepreneurs Fund, our ATEC Startup Competition judge, so he's very well versed with all of these companies, which include some of them are in his portfolio itself, and also part of the ATEC Advisory Council. So with that, perhaps let's start the discussion about what potentially the future of startups would look like, startup ecosystem would look like in the GBA. And maybe it's helpful perhaps to have a framework from which to evaluate sort of future potential. So maybe things like taking a look at the markets first, and then talking about talent, and then capital, and then finally execution. So on the markets, what are the size of the opportunity, and how do we define it? So building a company based here in Hong Kong, or at least starting initially in Hong Kong, you always face this initial problem of starting with a very limited market. And so the question is this a challenge or an opportunity? So maybe in line with having you guys also provide a quick introduction to your business itself, maybe we can go down the line and we can talk a little bit about why you chose the particular market that you're in, how you think about it here in the Greater Bay Area, and kind of what your business model is. So maybe we'll start with Erica.
Yeah. So we're a startup that spun out of the University of Hong Kong, and we started working with trauma surgeons there who, see the problems with the implants that are used today, and they still fail at high rates for elderly patients who have broken bones. And actually, Hong Kong for us, I think, is an opportunity because the standard of care here is very high, and the implants used here are, kind of the newest implants used around the world. But for Hong Kong, the price, I think, is actually relatively cheap. So we are able to work with surgeons who, have experience with the latest devices, and, we can get their feedback on, what issues they still see with the devices, what kind of clinical problems, what can be improved. And they are also kind of the leaders, I think, in the Southeast Asia and China region. So they go around training surgeons in the region. So I think the knowledge they have is very useful to us, and they're right here, so we can, try out the devices we're developing, get feedback, and then also use their clinical network in the region and abroad as well to reach out to other surgeons to get feedback. So being Hong Kong, I think, is kind of like straddling between US, Europe, and then Asia. So I think for us, it's been very helpful to be in this region.
Hi, everyone. This is Alvin from One Degree. So One Degree is really an insurance technology company. So we started from Hong Kong, and we got one of the 4 virtual insurance licenses. Now we got more than 100,000 paid users and 92% recurring users. So it is the largest amount of 4 virtual insurers in Hong Kong. But Hong Kong is really just the starting point. On the B2C side, we have recently also acquired a national broker license in China and launching, actually in the coming week. And there we basically is going to Greater Bay Area, but also the entire of China as well. So in China right now, we have 7,000 clinics that have signed to work with us. And so that's something that we really are going to scale massively. So Greater Bay Area, we can discuss more about that later on. Globally, we are also exporting our core system technology to different Asian and also European insurers as well. So that's really where we are.
Hi, this is Krista from Pickup. So Pickup is an asset-light technology platform linking up a lot of fragmented supply chain resources and try to help merchants or individuals to tackle the logistics pains. So I think starting from Hong Kong, it is challenging, but it also gives us a lot of opportunity. I think Hong Kong, we all understand that it's a population of 7 million. So we are often faced with investor questions saying like, okay, is this market big enough? But I think fortunately, because we are in a logistics space, so when we started operating in Hong Kong, we've already taken a pretty flexible approach and making sure that we handle logistics in a very decentralized way, especially when we look into us handling deliveries, not just within Hong Kong, but also, how do we connect if the delivery is going to Macau or if the delivery is going to other places? How do we design and make sure the structure is flexible and scalable? So I think this is something when we are situated in Hong Kong in a place where postal code doesn't even exist, we start thinking about interesting problems and also think about connectivity and also scalability very early on. Hong Kong being a very high-cost city, I think the cost of living is very high. So that means the kind of optimization we need to run and be able to make sure we get to the scale of economy and also very good unit economics is something that we have to think about very early on. So even though, yes, it is a pretty challenging city to start the business, but I do think that it let us, or make us a bit more well-positioned when we scale further out or later on to other places like, Singapore, Malaysia, even Taiwan.
Thank you, Crystal. And Chibo, as an investor yourself, like how do you think about, this question around the sort of market opportunity? So especially when you see young startups here in the area, in the region, specifically the Greater Bay Area, like what sort of things are you looking at? Are you concerned about limited market potential? Do you think about, what their roadmap looks like to expand outside of this immediate market? Or, what's your framework in terms of thinking about this?
So, I mean, obviously, I'm one of the most dedicated investors here in Hong Kong. Over the last 5 years, we worked very closely with the Ali Entrepreneurs Fund, invested in over 50-something startups here locally. And so, I think over the years, as we've gradually grown in the portfolio, worked with a lot of the, Hong Kong entrepreneurs like Crystal and Alvin, we've been growing together with them, and we've learned a lot through their journeys as well. You'll find that a lot of the startups that begin here in Hong Kong, they're able to draw a lot from global resources, global teams. They're able to prove out a lot of the key parts of their business models here in the local market in Hong Kong. And they're also able to, meet the right people and, grow the right networks to help them then scale that business model into other parts of, the region. And so whether that is going into China or whether that's going into Southeast Asia, Hong Kong actually is is actually in the middle ground where they're able to kind of make those two ends meet and make that expansion successfully. Obviously, as they've grown, there has been more difficulty in finding institutional investors at the later stages. So people who could lead a Series B, a Series C, there's not that many of those people in Hong Kong. Although that's gradually changing for the better, I think. But over the last few years, I mean, that hasn't been the case, and so it's been a challenge for some of these startups to raise that capital once they get to that stage of development, unless they have existing operations in some of those larger markets. And so I think that is a common challenge that I've seen. Although obviously the local government, the Hong Kong government, and related stakeholders in the ecosystem here have gradually brought more resources to the table, and there are more and more not just corporates, but large family offices, strategic investors that are now willing and able to look at some of these growth stage rounds. And so I think things are changing for the better. And obviously, I'm still super vested in the development and overall growth of not just Hong Kong, but the Greater Bay Area. And so I'm very hopeful for the future.
Right. So staying on this topic of, I guess, market potential, I think there's been a lot of talk about the Greater Bay Area for many years now. And it's always interesting to listen to founders themselves and see what the actual on-the-ground lived experience of that is, and how, the reality of what that integration looks like between Hong Kong into the Greater Bay Area. And so, when we think about the expanded market potential of the Greater Bay Area, it's interesting to see your business, Alvin, which seems to be taking, quite advantage of that. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about how you look at the future market potential of the Greater Bay Area, and how that impacts how you think about your business expansion.
Sure, absolutely. Well, so Greater Bay Area from an insurance perspective is really on the cusp of taking off. And if you analyze the different markets out there, when GDP per capita go above $20,000, basically the market take off, because if you don't even have enough to feed your 3 meals, you're not going to buy insurance, right? So as a matter of fact, Hong Kong, just one market, is bigger than the entire of Indonesia from an insurance premium point of view. But when it comes to 20,000, it's really the time that you see double-digit growth per annum type of rate. I think that's number one. Number two, there's a lot of different areas of livelihood that really integrate with the Ganzhou Daqiao, like the Zhuhai, Macau, Hong Kong Bridge, right? And then, so from motor insurance, there's definitely something going on there. From a retirement, from all the different things. So there's something that we are working very closely on with a team that is on long-term care. Okay, that is really, really working on how to do retirement solution between Hong Kong and Greater Bay Area as well. So there's a lot of things of those things, and also, of course, on the back of it, you got the of Wealth Connect, insurance connects coming up. That really the policy side is also giving you the tailwind and make it possible for the two places to really interact with each other.
And then speaking about, because what you're saying, Alvin, is that some of the market potential is indeed impacted by policymaking choices, right, in terms of encouraging further integration. And I guess one of the things that we've seen also in particular for example, Shenzhen, is kind of a redevelopment of Shenzhen into kind of an innovation space, in particular a life sciences space. So, for your type of business, Erica, you're in kind of the healthcare biomedical space. What do you think about the market potential of the GBA, and how does that influence how you think about your business? Because I understand, for your particular products, you're looking for regulatory approval in markets like Europe and North America. Did you think about looking, for example, accessing into the Chinese market, or is that how difficult a bridge is that for you guys to cross?
Yes, so we've thought about China. China is, I guess, regulatory-wise, a little higher, more burdensome, I would say, because of the requirements for clinical data. and to do the clinical study in China. And then a lot of the testing that we've done for approval in other markets often need to be repeated with the testing labs in China. So just entering China, it just takes more money and time in general. And then also for medical devices, we've seen that the market is quite, like for distribution, it's very fractured. So reaching, all the hospitals can be quite difficult. So you need a good distribution partner to enter China. So yeah, we've looked into that. I think for China, for us, it would make more sense to have a partner, a close partner. So we need to, find someone that we think we can work well with, build trust, and then can help us to access all the different distribution channels in China.
Great. And Crystal, I guess your business in logistics, it makes sense to, I guess, prototype a particular business model and achieve product market fit in a place like Hong Kong and maybe some, for example, like Singapore, very similar markets. When you think about sort of your roadmap going forward, where does the GBA sort of fit within that? Because I know you're expanding in other markets now quite aggressively. What are the challenges and opportunities of doing so in a place like, maybe any of the 11 cities in the GBA?
So the way we think about expansion, because we started in Hong Kong and then we went Southeast Asia. So every city we go, we need to think about language and then culture. And then we also think about the cost of living and then the supply-demand balance. I think for us to go back to go or expand into GBA, it's definitely something we have in our mind. However, I would say that when it comes to further integration, people think about GBA in terms of the capital flow, in terms of people commuting is still relatively easy, but you may be a bit surprised that in terms of logistics, I think because you're talking about tangible physical goods from Hong Kong going into Zhuhai or even like going to Macau. In fact, I think to this day, there's still there will be like a one-end custom clearance if you declare it in the origin, but you do not open it up or you do not break it up into smaller packages. But there's still no process where this can be truly automated. So a lot of our flow right now will still need to be double or triple checked by different regulators. So I think for us, definitely, we are already modeling it in a sense that these things are all fragmented and then we can track it. However, to really speed up the process, eliminating some of these physical checks or a more like easier custom clearing process will be what we really look for and when we think about a more integrated GBA area. And I think to your point, when we look at Hong Kong, as I mentioned just now, there's a very high cost of living. So in fact, if there's more traffic flow or people can freely move around a bit more, we do see that there will be much more traffic going out of different cities, because if you talk about just Hong Kong is 7 million population, how much can you buy from overseas? But if you are enabling 20-30 million of population, then that's another story.
So maybe let's pivot the conversation towards talent, right? I think talent is kind of the lifeblood of innovation and certainly the lifeblood of startups themselves, given kind of how small these companies are and how each incremental hire kind of changes, potentially changes the trajectory of the business. So, one of the questions around sort of talent, I'd be interested in kind of getting your perspectives on this, is, the tension between, what's being able to be sourced domestically, what the quality of talent there is here, and accessibility, and also the ability to attract international, top world-class level talent to come, work here in the Greater Bay Area. So maybe, how difficult is that? Maybe let's start with Erica, especially on a technical business. How difficult is it to hire here in the Greater Bay Area? Can you satisfy your talent requirements, and how much of it do you need to kind of source from internationally?
Yeah, for technical hiring, it is a little difficult, I would say, just because at least medical device-wise, there's not many medical device companies in Hong Kong, so of course, not many people have that particular experience. But for hiring, like entry-level engineers, we can definitely use our alumni network, so that's been really helpful for us. So actually, I met our co-founder and CEO through the MIT alumni network here. And then a lot of the interns that we hire are from the local universities as well as MIT. So they have an exchange program where the interns come to Hong Kong. Well, not in the past 2 years, but so that's, and then we convert them into full-time staff often. So working with the interns gives us a chance to, see their talent. And also they're usually the ones who are, really motivated and interested in working in more technical R&D and in a startup environment. So I think really using our personal networks and alumni networks has helped. And then for some of the regulatory, maybe some specific design engineering, we can hire consultants, most often US or Europe. So, and we try to specifically hire people who have orthopedics experience, just because it really speeds up the process when working with them.
Great. And Alvin, so as a business that's actually aggressively expanding in the Greater Bay Area, what's been your experience in terms of hiring? And, do you have any insight into kind of any differences in quality, in terms of technical ability of talent that you're finding in sort of the GBA regions versus kind of, what you would typically have been building out here in Hong Kong?
Yeah, well, great question. So what we found is that the talents in different markets are strong in different things. Okay, so in Hong Kong, we primarily do it for risk management across global markets. In China, right now in China we have people in Qianhai, Shenzhen, and also in Beijing. The talent pool there is extremely competitive, but also really, we face a lot of competition as well. What we found there is that they're really, really strong in growth hacking because they obviously have a really large market to play around and have a lot of experience in that. But the type of turnover that we have seen over there is make it extremely difficult to build something on the back end side. So on the back end side, most of the build out, we do it out of Taiwan. Okay, and then on the front end, on the growth hacking side, it's much more out of China. So we really take advantage of the presence in multiple different markets and optimize the talent pool based on that.
Very good. And then Crystal, logistics is obviously an incredibly well-established space, I would say, in the mainland. So in terms of, do you see that as an opportunity to hire sort of great talent, or is there an issue in terms of turnover, like Alvin is mentioning?
So we've run a distributed office, and our engineers are located in 5 cities. So a lot of them, they've worked together for like 2 years, but they've never seen each other's face. I think in terms of talent, it's always been difficult to source in Hong Kong. I think there's a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of competition, a lot of experienced professionals. They are in other sectors, maybe in finance or in risk management in other sectors. But I think for logistics, one is a pretty archaic industry. So what we're going in, we're trying to redo and restructure everything. It's already hard to source from other logistics companies. So that's one. The other thing is the kind of talents that we're looking at. Like it goes with like a lot of like machine learning, and also in terms of like predictive analytics, it's just not that easy. So I do see that there will be more opportunities maybe in Shenzhen or in other places. But then again, as Alvin said, it's also very competitive if you're hiring out there. But I'm actually quite positive, if they are to open up eventually another CBD or in the Northeast, if there are more talent flow, there more mobility, people can move around freely a bit more, then maybe it'll be easier for us to have the talents, being in Hong Kong, or us have traveling up in the future. So I think this is something that we do look at. But then again, I think for engineering talents, I think these days people are not as fussed about whether they're in the office or not. Most people are okay with them just dialing into Zoom and just doing work remote.
Very interesting. And then Chibo, when you look at evaluate these opportunities, right? Do you see any themes in terms of skill gaps in management teams that you see across the startups that you're evaluating in this particular region? And if so, is that something that VCs can or should help with?
To be honest, I mean, some of the entrepreneurs have been saying that it's very competitive. It's tough to get good people here in Hong Kong. I think that those tend to be true, but I would say that it's actually quite competitive everywhere, because obviously startups have become the hot commodity on the job market, and everyone kind of wants to find a place, find a role, find a platform for themselves. Just I guess from a more macro view of our portfolio, I would actually say that Hong Kong is a pretty good source for talent in deep tech sectors, in more higher caliber or higher level technology fields. So whether that's semiconductors, materials, or AI, I mean the best data scientists, whatever. I mean a lot of those guys are actually here because the universities in Hong Kong are actually some of the best in Asia. And over the past 5-10 years, whatever, I mean some of the best PhD and MD, master's students from China have all come here to study. And so there's a deep pool of talent there that just now in the last few years have begun to activate, so to speak, in terms of technology transfer, in terms of trying to commercialize their R&D kind of findings. There's been a few kind of champions coming out of that, like SenseTime and some others. And so, not just the students, but the professors also realize that, hey, actually there's if I can, somehow, link up with the capital markets, there could be something really good here. And so we're seeing that quite a bit. And I think, how that then translates into the rest of the Greater Bay. I mean, we're talking to all the big universities here in Hong Kong. Quite a number of them are building out separate campuses in various cities and districts within the Greater Bay. And so I think that is actually a very exciting development. Not only will that provide kind of a conduit for Hong Kong and international talent into the mainland, but that will also expand the capacity of these schools and their R&D programs. And so I think going forward, the mainland cities in the GBA have traditionally not been known for top tier schools and universities and programs. With the big ones being in Shanghai and Beijing. But as Hong Kong universities build their programs in and expand them into the GBA, I think that the level of talent coming out of GBA will also gradually increase over time. And so I just feel like talent not only will become more global, will become more high caliber, and the next 10 years will be very good.
Thank you. I think that resonates quite a lot, actually, because just speaking from the perspective of ATEC itself as an alumni-led conference, that idea of there being an alumni effect, whether it be between founders themselves who've then, for SenseTime or Tencent, for example, in this particular region, who've now kind of graduated on, have basically become successes in themselves, offering themselves up as mentors or being able to identify new opportunities. I think that is, part of a burgeoning ecosystem, along with, the actual alumni effect of people graduating from sort of schools and developing kind of a stronger network that allows people like Erica, for example, to find co-founders. So, hopefully this will develop over time, and this is, the aspect of a healthy, a growing startup ecosystem. So let's move on to kind of capital raising. So, the experience of raising capital here. And maybe we'll start with Alvin, because Alvin, I believe One Degree, recently had a successful close of your Series B1 earlier this year. I'd be interested to hear about your experience in terms of your fundraising process to date, and what has been any insight you can provide in terms of the differences between local, domestic, institutional investors versus international ones. Because if you look at other ecosystems around the world, one of the drawbacks is in smaller markets, whether it's the Netherlands, for example, or things like that, they find that the domestic VC ecosystem tends to be a little bit further behind. And the unicorns that have come out of like those systems have been identified by, basically American or European VCs. So it'd be interesting to hear kind of your experience of being recognized as a successful startup, differences between domestic and international VCs.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I think in early stage of the of fundraising, we had 3 rounds, A and 2 extension rounds back in earlier years, and very thankful to have a lot of the family offices in Hong Kong, and also with AEF, with Gobi also stepping up and support. And I think in early days, it's extremely important to have that social proof, that they can find people to really validate this guy, is this a right guy to invest in. But of course, when it comes to scaling, I think the international capital does make a big difference. Like the type of expertise that they have domestically and all that. So I think that's number one. Number two, what I found is in the last several months, there's a big waves of Chinese money trying to invest in Hong Kong and Southeast Asia startup. So really massive change. Some of them may not really look at Hong Kong startup in the past, but really take serious look at that. I think that's one area. Another area that there's a lot of capital coming in is on blockchain related stuff. So we are working on a potential spin-off of a digital asset related insurance project, and there's so much capital out there that are also looking into that. And those guys, most of them are international guys, and also looking to have the startups to scale globally on that basis as well.
And Crystal, as a business which is kind of in a similar stage of development, what's your experience been? I know like you have a lot of support from sort of corporate venture capital arms.
Yeah, I think we've been very thankful. I think on our cap table we do have investors like Chivo, more supporting us in the early stage, and then we also have validation from some corporate investors. Funny enough, like some of them are clients turned investors. I think what they are seeing is there's a need for the digital transformation, and especially during COVID, I think like there's this new term everyone is thinking about, time compression and then quick commerce, but how do you do it sustainably, and how do you do it in a very profitable way? So I think these investors, they when they look at Pickup, they do see us as a piece of the solution, allowing them to handle some of these digital transformations successfully, and hence investing in us, so that we have further integrations, and then we can work closer in terms of like handling some of their not just logistics, but the entire supply chain. How do you transform it? So I think this is something maybe 3-4 years back, we wouldn't imagine a lot of this interest from strategic holders, because I think in Hong Kong, a lot of the early stage investors are mainly family offices, or sometimes angels, but not so much like larger corporates or even MNCs. A lot of them are still pretty conservative, but I think because of the pandemic, a lot of the mindset has changed. So all of a sudden, they've caught up with this trend and see that, if there's a solution out there, they are now pretty welcoming, for these kind of change. So I think we've been very lucky, to come across some of these supportive shareholders.
Maybe I just like, just because I know these two so well, maybe I could just kind of just say a few words on your question with regards to capital raising. And, obviously I think Alvin, we supported very early on before he even had his license. He actually raised 2 or 3 rounds of his Series A before he even got his digital insurance license. And so I think, that's obviously like a great example of, an entrepreneur like identifying an opportunity and being very flexible in the way that, he structured his deals to make it make sense for the investors to come in and support him. And, I think that, like entrepreneurs should have that tenacity and also that willingness to adapt in order to do the best for their startup and their development. Crystal was also a very early investment, but the story of Pickup is actually it's not all been great, right? She's been through like quite a lot of difficult times, and I think. That when you go out to capital raise, it's not just a factor of the entrepreneur, it's not just a factor of the startup and the business model, but a lot of it is market window and timing. I mean, so many startups have come out with the right idea, with the right team, but just not the right timing. There were just not investors at that time looking at these opportunities, or just in general, the funding environment just wasn't great. And I think Crystal went through a very difficult time at the beginning of COVID when everything all of a sudden locked down, and a lot of her orders were obviously like small enterprises that were doing local business, and so she actually did quite a lot of business pivoting or like new trials of like food delivery and different things. She got some flack from the board for doing that, but at the end of the day, she actually preserved a lot of cash flow, like survived through that time window, and now once like the environment has changed, not just the COVID environment has changed, the capital environments, like now a lot of the corporates are saying, okay, well actually this is a very interesting business that I want to tack on to supplement my existing business lines, and now all of a sudden she has more interest than she can handle. Like it's like very surprising, right? I mean, like we were talking with Crystal at the beginning of 2020, and we're just like, dude, are you guys gonna make it? And we were talking about internal rounds, we're talking about venture debt, like different ways to keep them alive. And then fast forward like 9 months, and she's oversubscribed on like 3-4 times the valuation, and it's really funny how environments, how investor sentiment. And how the business overall can change, and so I think just wanted to share those kind of 2 things.
Thank you. And actually, thinking about that, it kind of speaks to the need for a level of sophistication, I think, in early stage investors, right? That allows them to kind of have that long-term perspective, that ability to identify tenacious founders, and the patience to kind of sit through that. And actually, be interested in both Chibo, your opinion, and Erica as a kind of earlier stage company. How would you rate the effectiveness of, seed investors, angel investors here? Because I guess one thing I note is if you look at the capital stacks and established, VC markets like Beijing and Shanghai and the mainland, it's a very, very filled capital stack. At every level, you'll find people with, a wealth of experience. So. Okay, it's just maybe we'll wrap up here actually. But to your point, Erica, how effective do you find sort of angel investing here?
Yeah, I mean, definitely they've helped our company keep going. So a lot of our funding is from local angel investors as well as from the U.S. And friends and family, and now we're transitioning more to the family office stage. For medical device, I think, once we gain some traction with some sales, then the VCs will be more interested. We don't have any buzzwords in our portfolio, so medical devices, I think, is more traditional. And then we also have, the large orthopedic companies who we have relationship with, who keeping, an eye on what technologies are out there. But I think they, pay more money, but at a later stage to see which ones are kind of moving forward ahead.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so I'd like to thank everyone for a very interesting discussion. I hope you'll realize that these guys represent a real diversity of different business models and companies at different stages, and it's been very, very helpful to kind of hear the sort of on the ground lived experience of running one of these companies. So thank you very much, and thank you to Chibo as well.